Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now here's your host, Stephanie Warner.
All right. Hello. It has been quite a while since I've been sitting in this seat hanging out with you at the Healthier Tech Podcast. And I know for myself, I'm really excited about today's episode because not only am I back for this special episode, but also I get to interview you for a change, and we get to talk about this really exciting launch and this really exciting new book that you have just authored called Empowered. And it kind of follows up where Overpowered left off. And I'm excited to hear more about it, and I'm excited to interview you. So yeah, welcome back to the podcast, R. How are you feeling about being in the guest seat tonight?
I think I'll be fine. I'm a guest on a lot of different podcasts, so.
Yeah, how about your own? I said tonight, but clearly, if anyone's watching the video, you can see it's bright as ours got palm trees and sunshine in the back. So tonight, whatever, it's evergreen. It's fine. All right, so let's jump in because I'm really excited to ask you a million questions about this book. So, why don't you start with telling me and the listeners about Overpowered? So that's the first book that you wrote a few years ago, and we're talking about the follow-up.
We're talking about a quarter of my life ago.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that came out in 2014. Or maybe it was 2013, but I wrote it in 2012 with my father, Dr. Martin Blank. And that Overpowered, it's still available. It's still one of the leading books in this particular area, is an overview of what science tells us that EMF or electromagnetic fields does to the body, and not just human bodies, but all living things. So that was written to summarize, in effect, what my father had learned over 30 years of his career at Columbia University Medical School and in collaboration with Dr. Reba Goodman and his involvement with the Bioelectromagnetic Society and so forth. Everything he'd learned about how this stuff affects us, but written for regular people, right? So not for fellow academics and scientists and smarty pants, but just for normal people to help educate what the science is actually showing and how much of it there really is. And it was very well received. And like I say, it's still available and still well received because not only of how much it covers, but of how accessible and approachable and understandable the language is. And that was actually my role in the book. Obviously, I was not the scientific expert. We already had a blank on the team who covered that. It was to make it all digestible, and so that's like I say, we wrote that in 2012. It was released in 2013 or 2014, I forget. And I started what became Shield Your Body in 2013. So it was in the course of writing Overpowered that I had the idea for Shield Your Body. That is, people need safer ways to engage with technology. And so by the time Overpowered actually came out, I had my first products on the market.
Excellent. You actually answered quite a few of my questions for my beginning questions in your intro there. And I appreciate very much that I didn't realize it was 2012 when you wrote the book. So my next question then to follow up is, how has the landscape changed since 2012 to now in regards to EMF?
So I would say awareness has grown significantly, but it is still relatively small. But you do have mainstream people in areas that go by names like biohacking and human optimization and general wellness that are actively talking about this stuff. Since then, Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN ran a 3-part special on the harms of cell phones, specifically the radiation from cell phones. So there's definitely more awareness. And I think corresponding to that level of increased awareness, there are a lot more products on the market. So when I launched the Pocket Patch, was my first product, which is now discontinued. because the phone pouch really takes its place. But when I launched the Pocket Patch, there were there were a few companies out there making EMF shielding products for consumers, but not many, and not with big sophisticated catalogs. Now, just to be really clear, EMF shielding as a technology and as a product has been around forever. Not forever, but for 200 years. I mean, a really long time. And it has been consistently used in industrial spaces and even in, your phone and your computer, because they need to wrap certain components in this type of shielding to protect them from electromagnetic interference. It was the consumer side that hadn't yet really developed. And I remember when I launched the Pocket Patch and you searched for it on Amazon, you were encountered with a list of ghost detectors. Right now, those ghost detectors are still available for purchase on Amazon, but there are so many other products out there that they get pushed down in the rankings. And that's just by way of illustrating how varied the marketplace is for these products. And if you're new to these issues, or even if you're not new to them, but you just want to look at protection, so you've been aware of it for a while, but you've never actually taken the step of protecting yourself from it. It can be really overwhelming, I think, to try to figure out what works, how it works, how well it works, and what use cases, or what types of exposures should I be protecting against first. And I put myself for a moment in the mind of someone coming fresh to the shieldyourbody.com website, right? Because in the past couple of years, we've really grown the catalog. I think we have something like 260 products in the store now. And I was putting myself in, and these are all products that I wanted to add to the store because I thought they're good products. They add value. They address a real use case. But then we got to the point where there's 260 of them, and I put myself in the eyes of someone coming fresh to the site and realizing I would think I have no idea where to begin. And so that is really where the idea and the inspiration for Empowered came from, is when I realized, not just as a buying guide, although I think first and foremost it is a consumer guide, but is a survival guide, right? So there are books like Overpowered out there. I happen to think Overpowered is the best one, but there are plenty other books by really good, legitimate scientists talking about the amount of science that shows that this stuff is harmful. And there's, in some of those books, like in Overpowered, we talk about minimizing your use of technology and maximizing the distance, but that's it, right? So there was no book out there that was actually a detailed guide for consumers as to how they should protect themselves from EMF radiation. And that is what I realized I had to write. And I thought it would take 6 months. It took 2 years. But now we're here. It also ended up longer than I thought it was going to be. We also added more products to the store, and I realized there were all these use cases I hadn't thought of, and so I had to talk about those. And that's that. I feel like I'm rambling here, but that's where Empowered came from, and that's the role it serves. It really is the only book of its kind ever written and available.
All right. Well, yeah, you did cover quite a bit. And I appreciate that. Overpowered to me is like it's the science. This is why this is important. This is why you need to do something. But at the time, there really wasn't a something to do for as far as consumers go, because as you said, the science was there for EMF protection, but it was used more for industrial things. It wasn't used for consumer stuff. And Overpowered really illustrated why consumers need to be aware that this is something that you need to protect yourself from. So what I'm hearing from you is that Empowered is kind of the next step. It's the action item. It's the part that it's the continuation from Overpowered of what we can actually do. And
Yes.
again, just to summarize, sounds like the landscape has really changed. We have, not only do we have a lot more EMF around us, but there's a lot more use cases because we have so much around us. And now it's become this kind of bigger business of things. And that, not only can the science be a little overwhelming to an individual, but also what to do about it can also be overwhelming, because there's, each use case adds its own complexity. And it sounds like Empowered is going to help answer some of those common questions, explain what to do in a way that's really easy to understand and take action on. Is
So
that correct?
you brought up a good point there, which I neglected to say up front in terms of what's changed since 2012, is the exposure levels are orders of magnitude higher. So not only, I mean, just as a starting point, more people have cell phones, but in 2012, the iPhone was still pretty new. So most people didn't have what we now call smartphones. And the reason I mention that is because smartphones aren't just cell phones, which on their own are pretty powerful things, but they also include Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, NFC, GPS, all these other wireless technologies that are adding to your EMF exposure. So more people have these devices, and these devices emit much more of this type of radiation. Because more people have them, we have many more cell towers and antennas. Back when we wrote Overpowered, it's almost certain that your thermostat wasn't a source of EMF, but now you may have a Nest. It's almost certain that your doorbell wasn't a source of EMF back in 2012, but now you might have Ring.
Yeah.
And they're
Your watch.
yeah, right. I remember when a watch was there to tell time. That's the generation I come from. So and we're using all of this stuff more, right? People carry their phones more today and use their phones more today than they did in 2012 because they are much more useful devices. So the exposure levels are way, way higher, and they are coming from more varied sources. And that makes protection a more complicated thing to think about and to talk about and to really address.
Yeah, and I think too, I just want to stop for a second and just say, when I heard you say there's 260 products in the store, I'm like, but when you're talking about all these different types of new exposures, it makes sense why there's going to be different, maybe a higher volume of products, because you're not just talking about back in the day when, the cell phone was the primary source for most individuals. Now, as you're saying, it's all over your house, it's on your body. And not only that, too, I think another really important thing to realize, it's not just the multiple exposures, but we're exposed to it all day, every day.
Yeah. Although I would say that for most people, and this is my own personal belief, I don't know how we could possibly back it with data, but it's based on intuition. For most people, their cell phones are their biggest avoidable source of EMF exposure. And that's as true today as it was back in 2012. Because, I mean, if there's a cell tower down the street, there's a cell tower down the street. So I don't consider that to be an avoidable exposure unless you're willing to move. But with the cell phone, you are in control of how you do that. Plus, these cell phones are really, really highly powered devices, right? And I mean, the cell phone itself has enough power to send and receive these signals over miles, if that's where the closest cell tower happens to be. But then you add in the Wi-Fi, then you add in the Bluetooth, all this stuff I was just talking about. And then you need to remember this critical fact about EMF, which is the power of the exposure diminishes exponentially with distance. So if the phone is 1 inch away from your body and you move it 2 inches away from your body, you've cut the power of that exposure by 75%. Then if you double it again to 4 inches, you've cut it by another 75%. Conversely, when you're carrying it in your pocket, or God forbid, holding it up against your head to take a call, you are getting a maximum possible dose that this very overpowered device can possibly emit. So these exposures are very, very, very high, even when you're comparing it to something like a nearby cell tower. And they are from a device that is completely within your control. You
Right.
decide when it's on, you decide where to carry it, you decide how to speak on it, or if, like me, you even speak on it at all. And so that's why cell phones are such an important focus of the book and my work.
Yeah, I really do appreciate you distinguishing that, because it is really important to know that the distinguish between like the factors that you're not in control of versus the things that you are in control of. And I think that our definitely our the product line at Shield Your Body does really focus around the things that you have control of. And it's really, I'm glad that you pulled that out and talked about that a little bit more.
And I'd like
So
to throw something
yeah.
else in there just so to make sure that the listeners are aware of this. So the book does have several chapters talking about EMF protection products, but before that, there's an entire section, also several chapters, talking about how your personal behavior impacts your
Yeah. Yeah.
exposures.
So I want to pause you just there for a second, because I was actually coming into the question of I'd like you to describe how you've broken what's in the book and how you've broken it down, because the front end of this conversation is very much talking about products and it is a consumer guide, but there is so much more in this book, and I want to make sure that we put weight on each section. So first of all, how did you break down the book and what's contained in each section?
Okay. Yeah. So the book is 27 chapters and it's broken into 5 sections. And so the first section is really about the science, right? So you mentioned that Overpowered is a detailed dive into science, and I don't try to replace Overpowered, although I did update, right? Because there have been some major
Mhm.
studies released since the book was written. So I did update some of the content, but I don't try to do the same thing that Overpowered did. That said, for the reader for whom this might be the only book on EMF that they get, I wanted to make sure that there is coverage of the science. So in section 1, which is understanding EMF, I discuss what EMF is, what the health effects are, the conditions that are known as electrohypersensitivity, or goes by other names as well, but the people who suffer from symptoms, serious symptoms at exposure levels that are very, very, very low. And then I also spend one chapter trying to explain to the reader why it is that someone like me can sit here and say the science is really overwhelming, whereas when you turn on the news, it definitely seems like more of a he said, she said
Mhm.
kind of debate. So I explain the corporate dynamics that are making that outcome a reality. Unfortunately, that's another topic where Overpowered goes into a lot more depth. Then the second section is about understanding your exposure, and so that really focuses on how you measure EMF, and it talks about the multiple kinds of EMF, right? So there's and if you're listening to this and you don't know these terms, that's okay because the book will explain them. But there's measuring radio frequency, there's measuring magnetic fields, there's measuring electric fields, there's measuring body voltage, there's measuring dirty electricity. These are all things that I know in real life, a consumer who's just browsing the web, they'll see one word, then another word, then a third one, then they'll get overwhelmed. So this book really tries to lay this out as clearly as possible. And so it explains to people how they can measure their exposures, because it is only by measuring your exposure that you know what changes you're going to need to make, right? Because EMF is invisible, it's odorless, it's tasteless. You have no idea how much you're being exposed to unless you learn how to measure. And so I go into depth on that and what safety guidelines and regulations around the world have to say about quote unquote what's a safe level or what's an unsafe level, how this stuff is determined and regulated. So that was section 2. So those are the first 2 sections. Then section 3 is, I believe, the heart of the book. and it is about the behavior, how your own personal behavior is a key driver of what your exposures are. And so there is a chapter on how to use your phone more safely. There's a chapter on what changes you can make in your bedroom in order to reduce levels there. These, again, are all things that don't involve any products. And I do that, because I think it's really important that people are aware how much their behavior impacts their exposure, even before you get to anything that might be called protection. And then B, because even if you want protection, you should start with the behavioral changes, because that'll be reducing your exposures in the first place, and you'll be putting less burden on the protection products and what your expectations and needs are for it. So, and another chapter there on what you can do in your office or home office to reduce your exposure. So the behavioral change chapters, I believe, are the most important for people, and I go into a lot of detail in those chapters. Then section 4 is an explanation of what EMF shielding is and how it is marketed, and how consumers can evaluate product claims for themselves, even if they don't have a lab, and how to kind of differentiate between the legitimate products, which are the ones that I cover in the book, but they're not the only legitimate products in the world, right? Let me be 100% clear on that. There are other companies out there that make and sell legitimate EMF protection products. And there are many, many, many more companies out there that sell various forms of snake oil. And so I felt it was really important to give consumers the tools in order to be able to discern the difference and to be able to make these evaluations on their own. And then we get to part 5 of the book, which is 10 chapters on EMF protection products. And these are all broken down, right? So there's one on meters, which isn't a protection product per se, but as I said, it's a very important thing for a tool in your arsenal if you're interested in protection. But then cell phone radiation protection, Faraday products, privacy protection, Wi-Fi radiation protection, blue light protection, dirty electricity protection. These are all broken in to their own chapters, and I walk people, the reader, through this. Now, the book, like I said up front, turned out a little longer than I had thought it was going to, right? So the structure here is important, because if you want to read it front to back, Godspeed. I love you. You're my favorite person in the world. But this book is designed so that you don't have to read it front to back, right? It is designed with clearly demarcated sections and chapters, and you can jump to the parts that interest you and that you feel are important to you. So, I mean, I think the chapters, the two on how to use your phone more safely and cell phone radiation protection, I think those two are applicable to basically every reader. But the chapter on dirty electricity protection, maybe that's not for you. The chapter on blue light protection, maybe you already know all about blue light and you got that covered, right? So you can skip the blue light chapter and not worry about it, right? The rest of the book will entirely make sense to you. And the chapters are named very clearly, and like I say, structured very clearly, so that even though it is a big book, I mean, it's a lot of information. It's high quality information. It's written very accessibly, but it is a lot. And so it's intentionally structured so that people can jump around and pick and choose the parts that they feel are important to them.
Now, I appreciate that. And thank you for giving kind of the overview and summary of each section and how you structured it. I appreciate, and I think the readers of the book will also appreciate that you've created it in such a way that you can kind of pull through, depending on where you are in your journey, what questions you have, and what it is you specifically need to know and what you don't need to know. You can just kind of pull through and get what you need and still have access to that information. Because here's the thing too, is EMF is complicated, and when you start working on an action plan, you really trying to do everything is too much, and you can start with what's most important. And I appreciate you highlighting kind of a good idea for where to start for any of the listeners who may just be starting out and trying to understand EMF, but also to start trying to mitigate, because you got to take that, you got to make it palatable and easy to take action. So I appreciate that very much. And I think what I'd like to do now is go into each sections. So I think what I'm going to do is just pull a couple of questions from each of those sections that I've already drafted, and just kind of get some more information, dig in a little bit more meat for our listeners. So I'm going to start with, you've already indicated that EMF protection industry has grown. It's a full industry now, where it wasn't before when you wrote Overpowered. So there's tons of products and many of them are ineffective. How can consumers tell the difference?
Well, I mean, the easy answer there is to read chapter 16.
Yes.
So, first off, the book, by and large, focuses on EMF shielding technology. So, this is technology that was invented in 1836, so almost 200 years ago, by Michael Faraday, after whom the Faraday cage is named. And what he showed, and what is universally acknowledged by scientists everywhere for 200 years, is that if you weave certain conductive metals into certain patterns, you can block and deflect EMF radiation in the other direction. And almost every product in the book that I talk about is based on this fundamental technology. And the reason I focus on it in the book, which is the same reason why I focus Shield Your Body's catalog on these technologies, is because its efficacy is measurable, right? Because you can measure, and I actually show you how to do this in the book. You can measure how effective this type of EMF protection is, right? Now, there are forms of protection out there that people I know personally swear by that are not based on EMF shielding. And if those work for you, or they work for someone you really, really, really trust, go for it. I make this clear in the book too, right? I say, just because science can't explain something today doesn't mean that science won't be able to explain it in the future. Everything, literally everything that science can explain today, science could not explain at some point in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That said, this is a marketplace that is rife with abuse, rife with bogus products, and rife with snake oil and customer scams. And so the only way to be absolutely sure that the product you are investing in even has the potential to be working is to know that you can demonstrate its efficacy for yourself. Then within that, right? So even with that separates the shielding from the stuff that isn't shielding. But then even within shielding, it gets really important, a lot of the details about how this stuff is tested and then how products are used and designed to be used. There's an example in the book, also in chapter 16, of a product that is laboratory tested that I believe does do what they say it does. And then I show a photograph from that company's website showing how they're demonstrating someone using their product in a way that amplifies and increases their exposure, right? So just because something is capable of shielding doesn't mean it will protect you. So you have to think through how the product is, what they're actually saying with the test, and then how the product is actually intended to be used, and make sure you're using it correctly. Another example I give in the book, and Stephanie, you'll know this from your work at Shield Your Body, a question we get all the time is, will the SYB phone pouch help me if I sleep with my phone on the nightstand? And the answer to that is no. And it's because of where the shielding has to be placed relative to the device and to your body. And so again, walking through all of this stuff, because these are things you can actually figure out a lot of before you order something, and you'll also understand a lot more about what you're getting and how you're supposed to be using it. Because again, how you are supposed to use a product is very, very important when it comes to this stuff.
Yes. I'm glad you're highlighting that because, and I'll get back to the snake oil question in a second, but I think it's really important, especially with what I see at Shield Your Body with questions, is it's really important to know that once you've vetted the product and you're like, okay, I believe this does what it says it does, the science is there, the tests are there, can I use it to do X, Y, and Z is not the right question. That's what we get a lot of that in Shield Your Body. The question, what you should be looking at is how is it intended to be used? Because these products are designed for specific use cases, which is another reason why there are so many products is in our catalog, is because you do need to look at the product and use it the way it's specifically designed. If you try to apply it to a different use case, you may actually increase your exposure. And I'm really glad that you brought that up because I wanted to highlight that specifically as well, because we do get these questions all the time at SYB. It's, can I use it to do this other thing? And our answer normally is no, it's made to be used this way. Thank you for that. The last question was really broad, and I appreciate that you were able to give us a really good answer. But I want to drill in just a little bit more. What are red flags that someone should look at when they're shopping for EMF shielding products?
Well, shielding or protection?
Shielding. Well, I'll let
you. So on shielding, if a company can't show you lab testing, I think that's a problem. Now, there's problems with lab testing too. So I explain this in the book. I think people will be really surprised at how transparent I am about a lot of these topics in Empowered. But the presence of laboratory testing at least shows you that this product has the potential to actually work for you. It doesn't mean, right, because in the lab test, it might show 99.99% effectiveness. And that doesn't mean it'll be 99.99% effective for you. But if a company can't show laboratory test data to support any of their product claims, I'd say that's something to definitely take note of. Another thing that I talk about, another claim that I talk about, are these sort of general ones, right? So like at Shield Your Body, we make specific claims about this helps you by reducing your exposure to this radiation because it's shielding it and deflecting it in the other direction. There are other companies out there that talk about harmonizing the waves, so making EMF kind of safer for you without just kind of relying on like magic. Like what they're saying it does isn't a thing, right? There is no known way to make EMF safer for you by harmonizing it or altering the waves in some biologically resonant manner. And so you have to be wary of claims like that. Once again, if you have a product like that and it's working for you, keep using it. Don't stop using it. But if you are looking to invest in this type of protection, I really advise that people focus their investments in the types of products that have quantifiable, demonstrable, measurable product claims, because that's the only way you'll be able to know if it's actually working.
Yeah, no, that's a really great answer. And I think it does give a good guideline for things to look for. So yeah, I appreciate that answer. So let's talk about what you called the heart of the book, which is what you can do to modify behavior, specifically when it comes to EMF protection. And to me, this is the section that talks about the slogan we say a lot at SYB, which is the best EMF protection is free. So, what are the top 3 behavioral changes anyone can start making today to reduce their EMF exposure?
Sure. Stop carrying your phone or your pocket or put it into airplane mode. If you do, never speak on your phone up to your head. Never hold it to your head when you're speaking on it. Either text or use speakerphone or a wired headset. Turn off your Wi-Fi when you're not using it. Those are definitely the top 3. And I explain in Empowered why those are the top 3, and especially the phone in your pocket one, although I already talked about that a little in this conversation. I explain why each of these are so important in Empowered, and I explain a lot more of these sorts of things. So, for example, never use AirPods
Mm.
and other Bluetooth devices. Never really, if you can avoid it, skip using wearables. But I also make clear if an EMF emitting technology is providing you either life saving or life improving benefits. So obviously a strong example there would be a pacemaker, but
Hmm.
perhaps a less severe option or example would be a continuous glucose monitor or a hearing aid,
Hmm.
right? These are all technologies that either save your life or add tremendous value to your life. And even if it's a source of EMF, don't not use it because it's a source of EMF, right? Because there is no hitting zero exposure in this world. Empowered is about giving you, the reader, the information in order to make informed decisions about where you want your exposures to come from, which ones are valuable and worth it. Now, do I wish we lived in a world in which you could get a hearing aid that didn't also have Bluetooth in it? Yes, I wish we lived in that world. That isn't an imaginary world. That world is called 1990. But today you can't get a hearing aid without Bluetooth in it. And so use it. I mean, take it out if you're not using it actively. So the Empowered isn't about avoiding all EMF, and certainly medical devices are a critical area of exception to my guidance on wearable technology. But with a lot of these technologies that you see out there today, they're just so extraneous. And the exposures can be insane. I share a link to a video in the book because I don't work with wearables that much anymore, but I was back when I was writing Overpowered, I got to be a beta tester on Google Glass. And I made a video. I bought this cute little doll set cookware. So it's a real metal saucepan, and I put egg in it. And I made this video that shows how you could cook an egg on Google Glass. And that's how hot it
Oh,
got, right?
wow.
They
Yeah.
don't, I mean, that should technically be illegal because you're not supposed to be able to cook your brain, but it is. So the link to that video is in the book. But that's as an example of just how extreme these exposures can be and how they don't care. That's not how this stuff is tested. That's not how this stuff is regulated. We are the guinea pigs in the experiment. We don't know what using AirPods for 20 years is going to do to you because AirPods haven't been around for 20 years and to do it in. And that is the kind of time horizon that we're thinking of, that we need to be thinking of for some of the more serious diseases and conditions that people are worried about from EMF exposure. We are just now starting to see massive spikes in rates of brain tumors in the
And younger
UK in
people.
young people. We are seeing massive spikes in early onset colorectal cancers in the United States. These all coincide with the surge in these technologies. Not AirPods, sorry, the cell phones, what we're talking about in this conversation. Carrying your phone in your pocket is going to give you the types of exposure that we would worry about causing colorectal cancer. And now we've been going around for about 15 almost 20 years with everyone carrying these phones in their pockets, and we're seeing a big spike in colorectal cancer. And we have to remember that that is based off of exposures from 10, 15, 20 years ago. Our exposures today are worse. And so the impacts we are going to see in 10, 15, and 20 years will almost certainly be worse, but we don't know what they are. It's very important to underscore that point. This stuff is
Right.
not tested for anything approximating long-term health effects.
Right. Absolutely. And that is where I think and what you're saying in Empowered is that it's really important to modify the behaviors, because here's the thing: we don't need to wear AirPods. We can absolutely listen to whatever we want to listen to. We can speak to whomever we want to speak to by using wired headsets. We don't need that exposure. We don't, and that we don't need to carry our phone in our pocket. We can keep it away from our body, or at least not carry it around for all day in our pockets, our bras, whatever. There's slight modifications that we can make that are going to reduce that opportunity for these, bad health effects down the road.
Yeah. So I'd like to give, before we wind down here, I'd like to give one or two examples of why I think Empowered is unique, right? So in Overpowered, for example, actually, I don't remember if we said don't carry your phone in your pocket. I should look that up. But we definitely talked about creating space between you and your phone, right? And so that was the advice in Overpowered, is create space between you and your phone, or put it into airplane mode. Empowered takes a much more holistic approach to this sort of thing. So number one is don't carry it in your pocket. Number two is put it into airplane mode if you do. But then I actually say, but I recognize that there are people out there who need their phone on. Examples I give in the book are for work. There's people who need their phones on for work. And when they're working, they have nowhere else to keep their phone except in their pockets, right? Especially, this is more common for men, right, who tend not to carry bags around with them to the same degree that women do. And so, okay, well, I just told you that you shouldn't carry your phone in your pocket, or you should put it into airplane mode if you do. But you just came back with, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but I have to carry it in my pocket, and it has to be on. So that's when the book then goes into explanations of the different types of protection products that exist for that use case, right? So I talk about the safe sleeve phone cases. I talk about the SYB pouches and bags and how those work and how those are different from the cases, and what the pluses and minuses are of cases versus the SYB phone pouch or an SYB fanny pack. I talk about apparel like from Haven, formerly called Lambs. When I wrote the book, they were called Lambs. By the time the book came out, they're called Haven, so I renamed it. And so that is one example of how Empowered takes a very holistic approach to these problems, right? So that's why the behavioral part is important. That's also why the honest discussion about protection products is important, because you're not going to get a comprehensive solution plan to any of these problems unless you are willing to talk about both behavioral change and how protection products work. Another, and I'll stop after this one, but another key example in the book is Wi-Fi, right? So Wi-Fi radiation exposure is really significant for a lot of people. So number one, swap it out for hardwire your internet, use Ethernet instead of Wi-Fi. But then, I deal with consumers every day. I know a ton of people who are just not willing to do that. Although I do give instructions on how to hardwire in the book. I don't just say go hardwire, good luck. I give actual instructions on how to do it. But there's people who don't want to do that, right? So then I say turn your Wi-Fi router off at night, because when you turn it off at night, you're cutting out about a third of your exposure from this stuff. That's huge.
Right.
But then there's some people who either can't do that, right? For instance, they have security systems that rely on this stuff or whatever it might be. Or they've done that, but they want to make further reductions. So that's when I talk about products like the JRS Eco Router and the Signal Tamer, and how these two things can take your Wi-Fi router and really slash the radiation exposure that you get from it. And you can take this sort of as a buffet, right? So as an example, in my house where I'm talking to you from right now, I do have hard wiring and I do have Wi-Fi. And I can turn one on. Well, I never turn the hard wire off unless I'm turning internet off in the house. I can keep the hard wire on and turn the Wi-Fi off. Even if I need Wi-Fi in the day, I can definitely turn it off at night. And I can use the signal tamer also. And so you can pick and choose to get the solution that works best for you. And so that's another area, an example of me giving a comprehensive, holistic approach to how you can mitigate your personal and family's exposure to radiation from your Wi-Fi router, either with behavioral changes or with protection products or some mix of both. And those are two clear-cut examples of why Empowered is different and why the approach that it takes is so important for consumers to have awareness of and fluency in.
Excellent. I'm fighting myself because I want to give another personal example, but we'll keep this focused on the book and what's in the book, because I think that's actually most important. And I know we're getting ready to wind down this episode, and I want to ask another question. And this is another very action oriented for the listeners. If listeners do one thing after reading Empowered, what should it be?
Stop carrying their phone in their pocket. I mean, I can't say that enough times. I really do believe that unless you're already taking these precautions, like I advocate in the book, if you're just behaving like a normal consumer right now and you are carrying your phone around in your pocket, that is almost certainly the single largest and most avoidable exposure in your entire life. And I underscore that because we get communication at SYB all the time from people who are freaked out about the cell tower that they can see from their window, and they're still carrying their phone in their pocket. That the phone in your pocket is a way bigger source than the cell tower across the street or down the block. And it's one that is so easy and cost-free to address. And if we could get the world to stop carrying their phone in their pocket, the world would be a healthier place tomorrow. And that is completely true. And that is the one difference that I would like to see happen in everyone who reads the book. Of course, just to remind people, the book goes into a lot more detail than that, right? So that's not the one thing you're going to learn from the book.
Sure,
but that is what I hope, the one change that everyone who reads Empowered, that is the one change I hope that they make immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we are going to wind this down with a little bit of housekeeping. So first thing, the Empowered has launched. You can get it now on Amazon, and we're releasing this episode tomorrow. So that would be September 16th. So for this next week, you can get the book on Amazon for 99 cents. And if you have the Kindle version for 99 cents, there's a paperback version. There's also a hardcover version. And for this week, you can get the Kindle version for 99 cents. There is a discount on both the soft cover and the hardcover.
Yeah, I forget the exact price. The paperback is about $15 and the hardcover is about $17 right now. Those are literally the minimum price Amazon would allow me to charge for them. They're the price at which I don't make any money off of a sale. And the reason is because I want to get this into as many people's hands as possible, as quickly as possible. And in a week, the prices will be going up to something that is much more sane and normal and human. So if this is the week where you should be getting Empowered.
Yeah, and they won't be overpriced.
No.
When they do go up. But also, this is something I know R would not say, but I'm going to say it. When you do get the book, please do. If you like it and you find value in it, if there's any questions that you have, you can go ahead and email us at hello@shieldYourBody. We're happy to answer questions. And also, And also, we need reviews. So if you could take a moment to review it on Amazon, that would help us get this message out and get this book out to more and more people. That's just how the algorithm works. If we don't get the reviews, then it doesn't end up in more people on the front page for more people to see and consider when they're looking at ways to be more healthy, and to do things to increase their health. So please do go out and take that few minutes to leave us a review.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
so I will also second that. This book took a lot of work. It really is a unique set of information. I think it is a survival guide for the world that we live in with the amount of radiation that we have. I believe it is important that more people learn about this stuff, and the reviews are really, really, really important to me personally and to getting this information out there to more people to help building even increased mainstream awareness of these issues. So
Yeah.
yes, once you buy it and read it, please review it. It's just super important. And the other thing I'll say, if you have questions, we also have a Reddit community. The link
Yeah.
to that,
Yes.
the link to that will be in our show notes. That's a pretty new addition for us here at SYB. But I respond personally to all of the discussions on Reddit. So if you have questions or comments, you want to talk about the book, you want to see what other people think about the book,
Yeah. That's
you
better.
go to our subreddit. And again, that link is in the show notes. And if you're interested in hopefully buying the book, you go to shieldyourbody.com/empowered. That is where you can get all the direct links to Amazon. You can also get a sample chapter for free at shieldyourbody.com/empowered. So that will also be in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing before we sign off. I have read the book. I am not a sciencey person. Yes, I do have a lot of experience with EMF because I've been working with Shield Your Body for a long time, but I'm not a sciencey person. And a lot of the information can get away from me because it can be very complex. And when I read the book, I just wanted to keep reading it, and it wasn't overwhelming. It was written so R keeps saying accessibly. I can't highlight that anymore. It is really accessible. So don't be afraid to jump in and read it. You're not going to feel browbeat and not educated enough by reading or when you read it. So please do give it a try and get a free chapter if you're not sure and check it out for yourself. All right, R. Blake, I am going to stop yammering. And I'm excited for this launch. I'm excited to hear what people have to say about it. Thank you for coming on today and sitting on the other side of the seat for this podcast.
Thank you so much, Steph. This was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech Podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources we mentioned today. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or on the platform of your choice. And if you're ready to take control of your tech environment, head over to shieldyourbody.com to explore science-backed tools that help you live a safer, healthier life in today's connected world.